This lecture is a rather futile attempt to convince you, humans who make photographs, that you are all thieves. Subsequently, it is also an introduction to myself, my thoughts, my opinions, my ideas, and my work. This includes my photographs, other people's photographs, a corporation's photographs, some color swatches, and a few French fries. I, Travis Shaffer, am an artist. I am a bookmaker, and I am an educator. Some say I am a thief, but I say I'm a photographer, of sorts. In order to convince you that you are, in fact, a thief as well, let me provide you with a loose framework within which to consider the issues of authorship, reproduction, and photography. To do so, I will offer you what is for me undoubtedly a work in progress, towards a theory of meaningful photographic reproduction. Photographic reproduction cannot be improved, further at least, by changes in technology. However, both good and bad photography can be made more frequent and will continue to exist in changing contexts and formats. Before I continue, let me note that I'm neither a philosopher nor a scientist. What follows are a series of claims that I hold to be true, or close enough to be true to be taken seriously. They concern three major areas: photographic reproduction, technology, and authorship. First, photographic reproduction is governed by and limited by natural boundaries. Truly photographic systems and methods are contingent upon the principles and physical laws of light, optics. For something to be truly photographic, it must be, as the word photography suggests, the act and/or the result of writing with light. As a result of this inherent relationship to optical principles, all photographs have a causal relationship to the thing photographed, light. That is, all photographs have a relationship whose effects are dictated by explainable causes. In semiotic terms, this relationship is referred to as indexical. An index is a semiotic sign categorization whose signifier, or sign, has a non-arbitrary relationship to the signified, or the meaning. One categorical example of the natural sign. Thunder signifies lightning. You hear thunder, you know lightning has occurred. In a similar manner, photography as an act is indexical. A photographic image is steadfastly bound to the rules that have created it. Photographs are systematic recordings of the interaction between light and matter, as rendered by a given photographic process. Again, optics. A most basic illustration of these principles is the camera obscura. Though having an uncertain birth, or at least a disputed one, it is believed to have been a phenomenon understood by humans dating as far back as 300 BCE. This device, effectively a small hole in the side of an empty box, room, house, cave, teepee, or airplane hangar, is simply a demonstration of optical principles that allow for photographic reproduction to be possible. A camera obscura is only capable of projecting internally that which exists externally. A camera obscura cannot create. It can only reproduce, recreate, or transfer. Secondly, photographic reproduction is reliant upon technology. From its inception throughout the film age and to increasing levels with digital and emerging methods, photography as a reproductive medium necessitates a relationship with technology. As a chemical, mechanical, or even digital entity, reproduction is inseparable from the technology that enables it. This also includes camera-less images like those of Anna Atkins, Moholy-Nagy, as well as contemporary artists like Adam Foose, even including those employing the scanner as camera method, and artists using written code to generate photographic composites. Not only is technology always associated with photographic reproduction, but technology in itself is in a state of constant flux. Photographic technology is constantly changing, and has been since its inception. Beginning with the founder of photography, be that Daguerre, Niepce, Talbot, Herschel, or whomever, through to Anna Atkins and her algae cyanotypes, O'Sullivan and Brady's glass plates, Ansel Adams and his zone system, the Leica, the Brownie, the Polaroid, Steve Sasson's .01 megapixel digital camera, digital sensors, the astoundingly bizarre Litro camera, the late Steve Jobs and his iPhone camera, and of course hipsters, the Diana and Instagram. Included in these technologies are some things that many of us would rather never have existed, such as HDR. Not only is technology changing, but these changes in technology lead to changes in the photographs themselves. Within the trajectory of the medium, methods of production have come and gone, and some come back again. Each new technology brings with it its own characteristics, object qualities, tonal range, and color palettes. They also each have varying levels of resolution, sharpness, and color accuracy. As the medium continues to evolve with the addition of digital technology, and many wandering back to old methods, there's a strong diversity in the essence of the photograph. Another aspect of these changes in technology are the changes in the relative speed and ease of the photographic process. From a more pragmatic standpoint, different technologies and methods make reproduction easier or harder, more cost-efficient or more expensive, as well as relatively faster or slower. A wet plate collodion negative printed using the albumin process requires quite a different level of investment than does a Kodak Brownie camera or an iPhone. It seems obvious to note that there are varying levels of speeds of photographic reproduction, and they are provided by changes in technology. The result of these changes, which generally speaking has made photography easier and faster, although not always, is an overwhelming increase in the ubiquity of the photograph within our contemporary society. I made a somewhat recent visit to Chicago, and while there, I, with some friends, made the obligatory visit to Millennium Park. There are many good reasons to visit Millennium Park, including the Crown Fountain and a Frank Gehry amphitheater, but the main attraction seems to be Anish Kapoor's Cloud Gate. Cloud Gate is a fascinating object, a giant stainless bean with a mirror polish. Effectively, it's a funhouse mirror on steroids. What fascinated me most wasn't the sculpture, as intriguing as it may be, but the way people interacted with it. Quite simply, Cloud Gate is a camera magnet. Scarcely did I see a human step within 20 feet of it without shrouding their face with a viewfinder. Or since most cameras no longer have viewfinders, I guess I should say they stuck a camera about 12 inches in front of their face. For me, this experience evoked Susan Sontag. In her book on photography, written about 40 years ago, mind you, she explains, it would not be wrong of people having to speak of people having a compulsion to photograph, to turn experience itself into a way of seeing. Ultimately, having an experience becomes identical with taking a photograph of it, and participating in a public event comes more and more to be equivalent to looking at it in photograph form. This encounter with the Cloud Gate reminded me of my first project from graduate school, or at least the first one I would show anyone. This work is titled, I Photograph, Therefore I Am. The title is an adaptation of the famous words of philosopher René Descartes, I think, therefore I am. This book is an ongoing collection of over 120 images depicting just what I saw so prominently before Cloud Gate, people photographing themselves. I Photograph, Therefore I Am is an investigation into the nude bionic man, half human, half camera. If this were live, I would ask you to raise your hand if you have in fact never made a photograph of yourself in a mirror or a shiny surface. Embarrassingly, you would notice my hand is down. More embarrassingly, this is the first frame of film that I exposed after purchasing my Hasselblad as an undergraduate student some time ago. Please do not get the wrong idea. I did not, as it may seem, start appropriating photographs as a result of my inability to make a good one. The book, created by sourcing images from Flickr, was created by simply performing a search query, typing in +mirror, space, self-portrait. From there, the curatorial process is simple. I deliberately chose images wherein the camera obstructs our vision of the photographer. This is done as a means of alluding to this bionic being. I know that these people are not consciously validating their existence by making a photograph, as the title and Descartes reference suggest. I would argue, however, that in some way it is exactly what they're doing. One way or another, the mirror self-portrait seems to be an act that we all must partake in. Whether this is a result of vanity, or of solipsism, or of being friendless and alone, I am still not quite sure. In spite of the constant flux of photographic reproduction and the increased speed and frequency with which we photograph, and the seemingly never-ending archive of images at our fingertips, technology seems to have had a minimal effect on the potential technical quality of photographic reproduction. If you're not willing to grant this claim, I think we can, at least, agree that we are at a point of diminishing return. For example, the daguerreotype is among the sharpest reproductive processes there are, and it is also among the first. I don't mean to start this battle, but is there a clear winner between digital capture and film capture? In the hands of skilled users? Consider that many contemporary photographers shoot 8x10 film or larger. Historically, that is not even a very large camera. If we're willing to grant these three claims, first, that photographic reproduction will constantly evolve with technology, second, that this evolution has and will continue to increase the quality of and dissemination of photographs, and third, that the reproductive accuracy of photography will or has reached a limit, then it seems that this thesis is in fact true, that photographic reproduction cannot be improved by changes in technology. However, both good and bad photography will and can be made more frequent and will continue to exist in changing contexts and formats. The purpose of all of this is to simply support my belief or theory that the authorship of meaningful images is in the recognition of meaning within the image, not in its creation. In fact, photographs are not new creations at all. They are reproductions. First, the subjects of photographic reproduction exist outside of the agency of the author, and subsequently, they are never, entirely authored by the photographer. Ultimately, it would be foolish to say that they ought to be original in order to classify photography as an artistic or meaningful act. Many of the qualities of the image are, with few exceptions, out of the control of the photographer. They are not a direct result of the photographer's volition. We do not create what we photograph. We dictate how or if it is photographed, and as importantly, what to do with it afterwards. Because we don't create what we photograph, or at least most of us do not, photography in some capacity is an act of reference to that which already exists. As I stated earlier, photographic reproductions are merely mechanical, chemical, or digital reinterpretations of that which lies before the lens, or film, or sensor, pinhole, etc. As a result, they are dictated by a system and limited by nature's physical boundaries. In a sense, all photographs are at some level appropriations. This point brings me to what perhaps someday historians will refer to as my Google Maps period. On Sunday afternoon in 1967, or a Sunday, not every Sunday, Ed Ruscha hired a photographer named Art Alanis to accompany him on a helicopter ride through LA. Ed selected the lots to be photographed by simply pointing at them, at which point Art would set up the camera and press the shutter. Within the book are 31 images depicting nearly 38 vacant lots in the city, or exactly 38 vacant lots in the city. So, then the question is Ed or Art the photographer? In 2008, at age 25, which is the same age as Ed when he published his first book, 26 Gasoline Stations, I self-published this book, titled 34 Parking Lots in Los Angeles via Google Maps. Here's a look at a comparison between the title page of my book versus the title page of Ruscha's. Like Ruscha's book, my artist book contains 31 images. Each image documents the identical location of the photograph in the original. The book also features the identical pagination and text from the original. The images are screen captures taken from Google Maps. They take advantage of the cool and detached perspective provided by satellite surveillance. The major discrepancies are the introduction of color, a change in aspect ratio and orientation, angle of view, and a vantage point. Many historians claim that Rouché's preoccupation in his parking lots book was with the patterns of lines, oil spills, and tread marks within them. In my version, the direct overhead vantage point, wide angle of view, and cinema display aspect ratio directly reference the digital. The city becomes reminiscent of circuit boards, a pattern of interwoven grids. At the same time I was producing 34 parking lots, I began to consider what the common denominator was within Rouché's work. It occurred to me that the primary preoccupation of his work, or at least his photo-based work, was all things peripheral to the automobile. Filling stations, road trips and road tests, parking lots in the Sunset Strip. All of this led me to analyze how, in contemporary America at least, we think about and see the influence of the automobile. One of the first things that came to mind was the Walmart Supercenter. Thus began my next project. 41 Walmart Supercenters is a collection of 41 8-inch square archival inkjet prints. The size references 8-inch roll film, which is typically used in aerial photography. Each image, like the parking lot's work, is taken from Google Maps. The number 41 is derivative of the average number of Walmart Supercenters per state in the U.S. at the time the project began. This project looks at the sprawling structure of parking lots, highway systems, and housing developments, which serve not just to be support for, but seem to require the automobile. These images question urban planning, land use and water runoff, and rapid commercial development, all of which seems only to support a unification and prevalence for a generic and almost indistinguishable identity. With the advent of such big box chains, we see a rapid deterioration of any sense of regional, or dare I say local, identity. This project, and the questions raised therein, would be all but impossible without the advent of satellite imagery and the proliferation of visual content accessible to me in Kentucky via the web. A question I would ask is what separates my pointing a camera at reality and selecting content to make a picture, and simply pointing a rectangle at the surface of the world as captured via satellite and doing the same. It seems to me that the very act of photographic reproduction is akin to collection and recontextualization of existing visual data. As a creative act, photographic reproduction is more like curation than creation. The authorial or creative act within the photographic process is one of pointing, just like Ed Rouché did in his 34 parking lots. It deals with the inclusion and omission of things. The task at hand is determining what to place in and, as importantly, out of the frame. As photographers, we ought to have the ability to intuit how the system of a camera works, and specifically how its inherent technology will interpret what lies before it. It seems to me that making technically well-crafted photographs as an end in itself is futile. Our ability to objectively reproduce reality is merely an issue of choosing the appropriate tools and not interfering with the reproductive system at play. Technical skill in photography is more related to one's ability to hide within the process than to impose our creative will. If only as photographers we could just stay out of the way. In late 2009 and early 2010, I installed a solo exhibition and two-person show of my series 11 megachurches, one at my alma mater, a small liberal arts college in central Kentucky, and another at an art center in Louisville, Kentucky. The series 11 megachurches is a group of 11 40-inch by 40-inch Google Maps screen captures of what are affectionately titled megachurches. Simply put, a megachurch is a Protestant church with over 2,000 weekly attendance. The largest of these has approximately 40,000 visitors a week. My 11 images are churches hand-selected from the 100 largest megachurches in the U.S. for reasons of particular visual and contextual relationships. Mind you, in exhibiting this work in the northern part of what's referred to as the Bible Belt, that is the American South, effectively, the artist's statement is deliberately vague And, as an artist, I find it appropriate to be deliberately neutral, as not to sway or disinterest the viewer with text. What is most interesting about this body of work is the objectivity of satellite imagery. I am merely placing a square around the church as it existed at the time of Google's photograph. There are no tricks, no gimmicks. This work is objectively taken from God's eye view. What has surprised me the most is the way that people react to the work when it's recontextualized from Google to a gallery. What this work has taught me about people and how they form interpretations is an important lesson. Whether or not meaning is inherent, there isn't a single objective way that a work will be perceived. People bring their own baggage, beliefs, objectives, dogma, cynicism, or what have you to the work. The exhibition in Louisville with a fellow photographer, Joe Johnson, and his large format deadpan photographs of megachurch interiors received a decent amount of local press, a full-page spread in the local paper, and a few pages in a local monthly arts magazine. This show reportedly, through the grapevine, that is, offended a pastor of a nearby megachurch, whose church was documented in both bodies of work. I am not even certain he attended the exhibition. This, Southeast Christian Church, is the aforementioned church. Now let me note that I cannot verify that offense was taken, I merely heard it secondhand. Though, if this is in fact the case, I would understand. Structurally, from above, it looks like a gigantic circus tent, which is a truly unfortunate coincidence, and let's hope it is unfortunate. Even if this instance is false, I have first-hand experience of the viewers coming to completely divergent conclusions about the work. Some view the work with anger as a result of land use and tax-related issues. American churches, big or small, are nonprofit organizations and do not pay tax on their property. Others cite a feeling of reverence and appreciation for the structures and their parishioners. What these images depict is the nature of these institutions, as well as their intimate relationships with the highway system, with parking lots, some with design motifs such as this one, and with runoff ponds, many of them containing multiple athletic fields, lush green lawns, even though they're in deserts, with fountains and waterfalls, cul-de-sacs, swimming pools, and generic suburban or ex-urban housing developments. In 2010, I self-published the book version of 11 Megachurches. As I am clearly one who respects copyright, I should mention that these images are courtesy of self-published Be Happy. Admittedly, not all work can be taken from Google Maps. Every church in Fayette County is a photographic installation that I created as my MFA thesis exhibition. This series contains nearly 300 images, and as the title suggests, they are of every church within the boundaries of Fayette County, Kentucky. That county is the county where the University of Kentucky was located. Each church was documented as it existed on the day I happened to encounter it. I spent approximately 8 months planning, mapping, driving, and shooting this body of work. Basically, I drove around with a map full of pushpins in the front seat of my car. Some days I photographed 10 to 15 churches, others I could only make it to 2 or 3. Each print is 10 inches square and is labeled at the bottom with the GPS coordinate of the church as located on Google Maps. The prints were mounted on archival foam core and hung in a tight grid and attached to the gallery wall, in such a way as to be easily removed by a viewer. The exhibition included a hand-painted map of Fayette County with white map pins marking the location of each church. At the closing reception, bread and wine were served, naturally, and each visitor was handed an offering envelope upon arrival. They were given the option to remove a print and take it with them in exchange for a tithe or offering. Fayette County is able to, with some fluctuation, support over 1 church per square mile. That is 1 church per 800 residents. However, it struggles to keep a handful of art galleries and art centers open. This exhibition, among other things, was a suggestion that the art world system of exchange needs reconsidered. As a side note, and I'm quite proud of this, I should add, I am the only graduate student at the University of Kentucky who I am aware of who made a profit on their thesis exhibition. Each visitor was handed an offering envelope upon arrival, and they were given the option to remove a print. So this is a stop-motion video of the exhibition as it was happening. Regardless of the bias we bring to interpretation, I believe that the act of photographic reproduction seems not to instill meaning but freezes it, allowing said meaning to be extracted by active viewers who, as a result of the image's dissemination, come across it. What the medium offers then is a format, a portable rectangle if you will, inside of which the photographer can neatly or hastily pack and disseminate meaning, ideas, concepts, stories, questions, emotions, etc. This portable rectangle is then, in truly democratic fashion, packaged for consumption by the masses. Or, as is often the case within the art world, it is selectively reproduced in a tidy, high-value, but low-number limited edition. Or, even more infrequently, and perhaps in an attempt to rival, quote, real art, it is made as an artistic original, one of one. What matters, though, is that the photograph is merely a vessel. It's a ghost of reality and of meaning, not the real thing. Residential Facades is a photographic project focused on the documentation of suburbia, overgrown and underplanned. The unadorned facades act as a veil of wealth and stability, hinting at the American dream. A dream it seems we can no longer afford. These replicated structures boast an overwhelming sense of the generic, an indexical sign of the death of the local. All of this results in the eventual decline of spatially derived identity and the emergence of a generic suburban, or perhaps American, vernacular. The title itself confronts us with a double entendre, one simultaneously describing the physical face of these homes, and in turn our neighborhoods and projected identities, as well as the illusion behind which lingers the fragility of a nation and its economy. This body of images, a typology of street-facing facades and suburban developments, makes a deliberate reference to industrial facades, a series of works by photographers Baron and Hillebecker. Less specifically, these images call on our memory of the many images associated with the New Topographics exhibition, curated by William Jenkins in 1975. Residential Facades, an ongoing project that I started in 2009 and am still working on, features an ever-growing number of silver gelatin prints, aptly sized to fit IKEA Riba frames. Moving forward, I've gone ahead like a real photographer and purchased a 4x5 camera, and I'm shooting these on films such that they can be printed also as large format inkjet prints. This is a very new project for me. It's titled A Few Palm Frites, and it's a 5.5 inch by 7 inch artist book in a McDonald's bag slipcase, and also a set of 20 inch by 24 inch archival inkjet prints. This book is effectively the contents of one single small McDonald's French fry inside of the cover of a book. The cover is the scan of the residue of the grease left as a result of the process. And the book, like much of my work, makes a direct reference to Ed Ruscha. In this case, it's Ed Ruscha's A Few Palm Trees. So though it's not a direct conceptual reference, it's more of a audible one. The resulting images are high-resolution flatbed scans of every single French fry included in one small order of McDonald's fries. If meaning within a photograph is inherent to the subject matter, then it is recognized and perhaps re-recognized, not authored. It is not the act of reproduction that merits valuation or praise, or even that dictates a good picture from a bad one, but the decision at which point to reproduce, and also at which point not to. Interestingly enough, it seems that images are wrought with meanings, as well as irony and ideas, axioms, and cliches. Whether the photographer, however, is, or was, or ever will be aware of them is another question altogether. We photograph well because we see well. What I'd like to talk about next is the idea of publishing and dissemination. A crucial factor of this is that one's work is of no value if not seen. As a result, we must consider the appropriate means and methods for dissemination, that is, how our work is put into the world. And we need to be cognizant of the context into which our work is placed, as they, as much as the work itself, will dictate interpretation. Mallarmé said that everything in the world exists in order to end up in a book, and I think that's a nice idea. But Susan Sontag counters that by saying everything exists to end up in a photograph. Also not a bad idea. But perhaps now it's the case that everything exists to end up online. Fred Ricken, a famous writer on photography and digital imaging, says that digital images are, quote, discrete and malleable records of the visible that can and will be linked, transmitted, recontextualized, and fabricated. I think this is applicable to all vernacular, mass-produced, and disseminated images. As an artist and an educator, I've gotten the astute privilege of living in such art world hotspots as Central Kentucky and Kansas. I'm not as far removed from you, from the art market as all of you. And obviously this is a joke, but there is a significance to my lack of proximity to what one might call an art world center. This distance, this barrier of space between me and New York, me and LA, me and London and Berlin, whatever it is, whichever town it is that you say is the center of the art world, has greatly dictated the way I approach my work as a photographer. It must be portable, cheap, malleable, and easily accessible via the web. Otherwise, how would anyone see it? In 2011, 2 of my artist books were included in an exhibition questioning the future or trajectory of the medium of photography. The exhibition was titled From Here On. The curators penned this manifesto. Now, we're a species of editors. We all recycle, clip and cut, remix and upload. We can make images do anything. All we need is an eye, a brain, a camera, a phone, a laptop, a scanner, a point of view. And when we're not editing, we're making. We're making more than ever, because our resources are limitless and the possibilities endless. We have an internet full of inspiration, the profound, the beautiful, the disturbing, the ridiculous, the trivial, the vernacular, and the intimate. We have next to nothing cameras that record the lightest light and the darkest dark. This technological potential has creative consequences. It changes our sense of what it means to make. It results in work that feels like play, work that turns old into new, elevates the banal. Work that has a past but feels absolutely present. We want to give this work a new status. Things will be different from here on. As they suggest, perhaps we should think differently about what a photograph is. It is as a solution to this outsider situation of living in Kansas and Kentucky, coupled with an interest in the conceptual art of the 60s and 70s, that I stumbled into the book as a format, and also onto self-publishing and print on demand. As a result of an engagement with web-based print-on-demand and online printing companies, it seems appropriate that the source of my work also shift increasingly toward more universal and web-accessible places. That includes social media sites, Google Maps, Wikipedia, Flickr, etc. I will close with what is, for me, my most absurd but most beloved project. I'll spare you an in-depth lecture about the animal that is the American sorority. It is a complex and intricate and frankly a rather bizarre entity. So I will just explain the process of the work, and should you decide, you can unpack what it's all about by doing a Wikipedia search and some blog searching to figure it all out. Sorority Skin Tones is a color palette. It contains 20 Pantone color swatches identified by color averaging screen captures, isolating pixels from the necks, chest, legs, arms, foreheads, etc. of females in photographs hosted by the 10 most popular American sororities' official Facebook pages. The resulting book simply shows you the 20 colors along with their Pantone color numbers. This, then, is a grid of what are rather officially, I might add, the 20 most prominent shades of American sorority skin. Note, specifically, the few colors closest to the bottom left-hand corner. This project, as simply a color palette, is quite adaptable and frankly should keep me busy for quite some time. This is an installation of the work I created for the grand opening of a gallery in Louisville, Kentucky. You might note that I said Louisville. That is how we say it. You might say Louisville or Louisville, but according to anyone from Kentucky, it is Louisville, 3 or 4 letter word. Anyway, this piece is roughly a 3 by 7 meter wall of painted cardboard boxes. And it keeps getting more fun. So this is the most recent iteration of the project. So this project, Sorority Skin Tones to Government Girls, is an artist book and a series of prints. The book is a 28-page hand-bound book, and it comes, appropriately I think, in a pantyhose slipcase. The book contains images of prominent sorority members, namely those women in or near the federal government who are sorority alumni. These images are GIF files that have had the original color palette pulled out and have been repopulated with only those 20 Pantone colors. They're 40 by 50 inch prints, and as you can see from this example, rather pixelated. So here's Condoleezza Rice, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and you have here the former First Lady Barbara Bush, and of course her daughter-in-law Laura. And I will end with what is for me my favorite image of the series, former First Lady Grace Coolidge, and her sorority skin-toned official White House portrait. Thank you.